People who realize they were the villain in someone else's story. What's your side of the story? Story 1. Also, this weird misunderstanding happened when I was visiting the Netherlands. I just bought a sandwich from one of the bakeries and was sitting by the canal eating it when this massive duck jumped out of the water and went straight towards me with its eyes fixed on my sandwich. I'm kinda worried it's gonna try to grab it off me, so I wave my foot in its direction to try to ward it off. The duck stops at my feet and just sits there staring at me while I eat. Oh, whatever, it's just going to sit there and not bother me, I think. So I just ignore it and continue eating my sandwich. Not long after this, a woman approaches me and speaks to me in Dutch. I look at her blankly and she keeps speaking, so I say, "Sorry, I don't understand." She switches to broken English and starts saying, "You make yourself big, you kick the duck." I continue to stare blankly, so she repeats herself a few more times. I'm desperately trying to figure out what the hell she's talking about. Story 3. Once my wife and I were waiting at an intersection, and there was a panhandler sitting on an overturned bucket holding a sign asking for change. I had $1 and some change in my pocket, so I gave it to my wife and said, "Give this to him." She rolled down the window and held the money up to the guy, but he just sat there and said, "Just throw it to me." My wife said, "Ha," and he said, "I don't feel like getting up, just toss it to me." So my wife took all the coins and stacked them up and wrapped the dollar bill around them in an attempt to make a tossable package. Then she tossed the package at the guy, and as he held out his hand to catch it, the package fucking exploded and coins went flying all around him, and the dollar blew away. He just sat there and shrugged at my wife, and the light turned green, so I started to drive into the intersection. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw that the lady in the car behind me had gotten out and was collecting the coins off the ground, handed them to the panhandler, and then gave him a "you poor soul" hug. I realized later that to her it looked like we had callously thrown our spare change at this poor panhandler who had put his hand up to defend himself, sending change flying everywhere. I imagine she thought we were cackling with glee, Cruella de Vil style, as we sped off after our disgraceful act, and she felt the need to comfort him after he had been treated so badly. Little did she know the guy was just a lazy shit who couldn't be bothered to get off his bucket. Story 4. When I was in 5th grade, I was good friends with a kid in my class. I had just moved to the area before the school year began, and he helped me get adjusted to everything. He was even quite generous, letting me borrow his Nintendo Power that had a guide to FF1. We also got into various boyhood shenanigans, roughhousing, and the like. One time, I was showing off my balance by walking across one of the playground beams that was a few feet off the ground. On impulse, he pushed my foot as I was taking a step, and of course I fell. I wasn't hurt. We both thought it was hilarious. I threw some playground sand at him in retaliation. As I relayed this story to my family that night, thinking it would get some laughs, my mother said, "He didn't even apologize. He doesn't sound like your friend." I tried to backtrack a bit and recover from the unexpected reaction, but I was only 9. She followed up with, "I forbid you to be friends with him." This, of course, was when I was still obedient to my mother. I was so sad, I cried most of the night in bed. The next day at recess, I told him that my mom said we couldn't be friends anymore. I didn't even wait for a response. I just walked away, sat under a tree, and fought off the urge to cry more. He was hugely messed up from that, I think. He resented me, justifiably, for the rest of the school year. He started bullying me and legit getting into fights with me. He started to bully others too, and became a loner at recess. Another of my friends from that era of my life remembers this kid as a bully. So not only was I a villain in this story, but I basically may have been another villain's origin story. Maybe he was always seen as a bully before I showed up in 5th grade. Maybe the reason he became friends with me is because he didn't have any other friends because he was a bully in the earlier grades. But as a person who tries to be a good person, I had the ability to choose to be a good influence on this lonely kid through my actions and our friendship. Instead, I abandoned him, seemingly suddenly and for no reason. I was never obedient to my mother again after realizing what may have resulted from that. I knew I needed to use my own judgment on what actions may be right or wrong. I'm sorry, Jake. I still have your Nintendo Power. Story 5. When I was in elementary school, there was a girl who copied everything I did, from what I would wear or paint in art class, and even down to the way I'd organize my desk. One time she heard my friend and I talking about going to the neighborhood playground to hang out, and she just showed up. Neither I nor my friend really liked her, so we said hi but kept playing without her. After she tried to play with us multiple times, my friend and I just decided to leave because we didn't want to play with her. I thought she was trying to take my identity and my friends by becoming me, and it made me really angry, so I wasn't very nice to her. I wouldn't play with her at recess. I didn't want to sit next to her at lunch. And when she asked me to come over and play, I would always say no. Obviously, she was just insecure and wanted to be friends, but being 10, I didn't understand that. During high school, I realized what had been going on, reached out to her. We talked about it, and we both explained our sides of what we were thinking at the time. I was an ass, but she understood how I could feel that way. I apologized, and we both went on with our lives. Even if she did forgive me, I was the villain. If it helps, I try very hard to make sure I'm trying to understand where people are coming from because of this. Story 6. Came to this realization with the help of a friend named Lucy. Several years back, I ended up hooking up with a best friend of mine, and we clicked like a perfect match. Dana and I spent a week together exploring each other's bodies and just being super content. It was surreal. Nearing the end of the week, the conversation happened. So, what are we? We mutually agreed to keep things casual because we were in transitory periods of our lives. Anyway, that fateful week culminated with my birthday on a Saturday. Dana volunteered to throw me a party at her place, and all of our friends were going to come. Fantastic. My other friends invited me to their house to begin partying in the late afternoon. Dana gave me the okay to take off, and she would set up on her own. About 4 hours later, after pre-gaming with friends and attending a local mini-film fest viewing, I stumble into my party just as it is taking off around 9 p.m. Since it is around Christmas time, we had agreed to do a Pollyanna gift exchange. I started off by handing a poorly made wooden boat to a buddy of mine and immediately proceed to the kitchen to take a shot of tequila. At that moment, I blacked out until about 1 a.m. The night is a blur. I remember dancing a lot. Yacked a couple times, but always bounced back. And then I fucked up. There is another girl, Carla. Carla and I had a brief stint fooling around, and that was that. Nothing more of it, just friends afterwards. Anyway, Carla hadn't gotten me a gift, so she thought a little makeout sesh would suffice. So it is nearing 1 a.m., and I am still dancing like a fool when Carla appears in front of me. I don't know what it was, but she gave me those eyes, and I knew exactly what she was thinking, so we made up for a few minutes. I turn around to see a crowd staring at us from the kitchen. Me being off my rocker, shrug, and keep dancing. Dana was not happy. Shortly after, another friend of mine who I had been involved with in the past shows up and mentions grabbing a pizza. Next thing I know, a small group of us left the party, grabbed a pizza, and went back to my house where I passed the fuck out. So I was a stupid, selfish, heartless idiot that totally betrayed a best friend I had recently gotten romantically involved with by leaving her to set up for my party by herself, showing up wasted to the party and immediately blacking out making out with someone else in front of her in her house at the party she was throwing me, leaving to get pizza and not returning until morning. I was in denial of my guilt initially, but upon some enhanced reflection a week later, I realized how selfish and self-centered I had acted. After a month apart from each other, Dana even tried to forgive me, and we started a serious relationship together. But I had broken the trust already, and there was no going back. As years have passed, it becomes clearer and clearer how knuckleheaded my behavior was over the course of those 3 to 4 months. I truly was the villain from every angle. I know Dana never wants to hear from or see me again, but I wish I could tell her that I understand I did her wrong, and I understand why she was so frustrated and upset with me. Early 20s are the stuff of life lessons.